Welcome to episode 8 of the AFA GenX podcast. My name is Ashley Mahadia, the National Chair of the GenX Community of Practice, and your host for this episode. A big thank you to the AFA for allowing us to host this podcast and to our supporting partner, Advice Intelligence, for powering this episode. In 2021, cybersecurity authorities in the US, Australia, and the UK observe an increase in sophisticated high-impact cyber attacks. 43% of cyber attacks are targeted at small businesses, and 95% of all attacks are done via email hacking. This episode will help you understand the importance of a cybersecurity plan for your practice. We speak with Karen Stevens, founder of Be Cyber, and Fraser Jack, founder of the Cyber Collective. They are both on a mission to make sure that every Australian can trust their financial professionals with their confidential data. Karen and Fraser, welcome to the AFA GenX podcast. I really look forward to your insight on how financial advisors can be more cyber resilient.
We will do our best.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Right, let's get into it. So how do we bridge the gap between cybersecurity and financial advice? Karen, we'll start with you.
Okay. I think one of the key things to understand is that cyber is not a technical problem. It's a business problem. Okay. So, an advisor spends years building up their business, gaining the client's trust. The client trusts you with their financial health, their financial wealth, and all of their data. And that can be undone in an instant by the accidental pressing of a button or, sharing of information that you don't want. So it's very easy to lose that trust. And if you lose that trust, then you may actually, and I know this sounds a bit scary, you may actually lose your business. There was a KPMG Small Business Reputation and Cyber Risk report that came out in relation specifically to financial services. And they said that financial services who had suffered a cyber breach, nearly 2 in 5 businesses had lost a large portion of their clients in the direct aftermath. So we've got to be really careful about that. And I think the other thing is that ASIC are becoming more interested. Cyber cuts across all facets of your business, be it HR, financial services, invoicing, favorite place to hide in plain sight. And they've actually come out very recently to the Australian Institute of Company Directors. So that was on the 3rd of March this year. And they actually said, we are prioritising cyber governance and cyber resilience. It's a key priority for them. So they don't expect perfection, but they expect some sort of positive movement. So I think it's really important that we don't just say cyber is a techie problem, it's over there. It's not. It's a business problem, but it's also a business opportunity, and we can touch on that a little bit later.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's certainly, I think the very first part of bridging the gap in any particular circumstance is that the deciding to do it and taking the mindset towards it. And, Karen's just mentioned some very practical things that we should all be focusing on. But a lot of the time, advisors are busy. They've got a lot on. They've had a lot on over the last few years, and the cyber thing's kind of just been pushed to the back, or it's on the list, but it's nowhere near the top of the list. And I think the biggest thing that we can do for bridging the gap is actually making it a priority, in the business. And if it's not you, you're listening to this podcast, but if it's not you in the business, then it should be somebody, and having a cyber champion or somebody in the business that can take that lead and get the information and then bring it forth to the practice, because it seems like it's a different world. It seems like it's a lot of terminology and technical stuff that you just can't get your head around. But in many cases, it's not so difficult once it's been explained to people and get a little bit of understanding, a little bit of information, and get started. And the other thing to note on it too is it's not so much that you do a cyber transformation and that's the end of it. Like, a cyber transformation needs to become business as usual, like having your staff understanding what they're doing in security and having all the little bits and pieces and the hygiene and the basics in place. It's not about doing it and forgetting about it. It's about it becoming BAU and taking that mindset approach to say, this is something that we're going to implement in the business and continue to run in the business every day, every week, every month, from here on.
Absolutely. And if I can just add one thing there, Fraser, what I noticed when I moved from the advice world into the cyber world is that there are terms that cross over both but have two totally different meanings. I went to what I thought was an asset management presentation, expecting a fundie to tell me all about life. And they were talking about software and hardware. And I'm sitting there going, oh, this is not what I signed up for. So I think we just have to acknowledge that, you know, there are no dumb questions when it comes to this, because we've all fallen into the, oh, is that what you mean? Oh, I thought you meant that. So I think that's really important as well.
Thank you. Fraser, can you please mention a few cyber events and the impact those could have on financial advice practices?
Yeah, so there's been a lot of different cyber events happen to financial advice practices, as well as other businesses outside of financial advice. But specifically in financial advice, there's some well-known cases that have been through courts recently that talked about employees working from home, hackers hacking into to home routers, obviously fairly easy, using brute force type hacking tools to guess passwords, guess the correct sequence of passwording to get into somebody's remote desktop or into their work server. And once they're in under a guest password, they're a legitimate user. Again, they're not coming in as a hack. Coming in, they're coming in to CRMs and to software and to service business work service as a legitimate user, and so then they can then download and take their time to steal client information, use that to sell on, and that information can be used on the dark web. AML, CTF type issues kick in, federal police get involved. It all then comes back down to later on finding out that the financial advisor was hacked, many months down the track. So that's sort of one of the ways, but there are a lot of stories I hear about with email, people getting in through clicks on emails and not even just getting in, like you think of they're going to lock out and ransom, you pay some money. And that's certainly one of the ways, but a lot of the time it's getting in or intercepting transactions between spoof emails, trying to let people know that there's a new BSB and account number we want that money paid into, and coming in and pretending to be from the advice practice or one of the domains of the advice practice, and then tricking the clients into paying the money into the wrong account.
Absolutely. And look, one of my favorite soapboxes, so I'll try not to stand on it too heavily, is the whole insider threat, the risk whose name we dare not speak. Because obviously none of us want to think that our staff would do something naughty towards us or our clients. But unfortunately, there's a great example, if you can call it that, out there in Australia. So in February 2019, there was a group who many of you may be familiar with called Landmark White. It's quite a famous case. So essentially, they had two long-term employee contractors, so 12 years. So these guys have been working in the business with their clients, with their staff for 12 years. And they basically got the irrits over something and dumped all of this valuation data on the dark web. So by December of that year, they'd spent over $8 million in remediation. They had relisted under a different name. So if you Google Landmark White cyber breach, you'll notice that they're no longer called Landmark White. And two blokes are now obviously facing court, and they've been in jail for quite some time over it. So I think that's really important. You just sort of, it's the unknowns, if you will, that you just have to be super, super careful for. And I think, there are some of the trends that we can learn from the US, and it's sort of slightly onto the next topic. So I just realized that, Ash, so I'm really sorry. But in the US, what we're seeing is the whole education piece that Fraser mentioned. But they're taking it beyond just the staff, and they're actually taking it to their clients. Now, I fully acknowledge that this is in the private wealth space, and not everyone plays in private wealth. Fully accept that. But, bringing that up with your clients, just letting them know that you as a business are cyber aware, and you're taking not only their financial health, but their data protection really seriously, and giving them handy hints. You're not the expert, but you're showing them you're cyber aware. So I think that's something perhaps as well.
Yeah, and I also want to just add to that the ramifications are pretty serious here. It's a bit like when we do estate planning, we say, you do estate planning because it costs a lot less to do time and effort and money to do estate planning at the beginning than it does, at the other end when you're trying to sort things out. And this is exactly the same with cyber incidents and cyber breaches. It's certainly the cost and time associated with doing this at the beginning, it far outweighs the cost at the other end. But yeah, some of the stats are incredible. The length of time businesses are out, the loss of trust having to tell your clients that you've been breached and you've lost their private and confidential information, professional reputation, because not only do you have to tell your clients, you have to tell the regulators, who then publish you as a risk. Yeah, you're meant to also tell your suppliers and your supply chain people. So, loss of trust, loss of business valuations, and loss of reputations are probably the three big problems here that advisors face.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if we can just add cyber insurance in there as well, because what some people don't understand, cyber insurance is not that dissimilar to the personal insurance that advisors use on a day-to-day basis, TPD, IP, things of that nature. And the T's and C's are a bit of a movable feast at the moment. What we're seeing is premiums are going up. Gallagher's came out and said that they're increasing, the median increase is 50.2% globally. So that's for the small and medium business market. But what's happening is the terms and conditions, the coverage is actually contracting. So you're not covered for as much as you once were. And the other thing that people need to remember is they need to follow with cyber insurance the bouncing ball. Okay, so if your cyber insurance says, this is the first thing that you need to do in the event of a cyber breach, you need to do whatever that first step is. And the reason for that is just like any type of insurance. If you don't follow the bouncing ball, so to speak, then you may actually decrease the amount that you'll get paid, or you may not be covered at all. So, you just be a little bit aware with that. That's one that a lot of people get tricked out of, unfortunately. So if you haven't read your cyber insurance, if you've just gone, oh yeah, the broker does all that, please read your cyber insurance policy after this. Grab a coffee, have a nice read.
Yeah, we always say, don't we, when it comes to other type of risk insurance policies, never worry about the cheapest policy or there's always a cheaper option out there. And we're talking about a product that lives in the general insurance space, so it's not as rigid as the non-cancelable plans, etc. from risk. So absolutely read your policy, understand it. There are a lot of people, advisors I speak to, that have their cyber insurance as a rider to their professional indemnity, which means that they can't actually claim on it if they need it. It's for their clients to sue them to claim on. And other products that, as you mentioned, if you remove the wording that says, you've got to be working from your place of work rather than any place, or anyone working from home, then all of a sudden you may not be covered when you think you are. Yeah,
you have to be super careful. And there are some really big underwriters out there that are actually no longer, for example, covering ransomware, for a number of the reasons that Fraser said earlier, because of AML issues. And also, and I fully acknowledge, big broad brush statement coming up from me, so apologies in advance, but the majority, I think I'm safe to say, of ransomware out there has its birthplace in Russia, and there are some issues on that at the moment. So by actually paying them, it's not only AML, you're breaching all number of political covenants as well. So you just have to be super, super careful.
Yep.
Thank you. That was very insightful. Karen, I think this would be your favorite question today. What can financial advice practices do to be more cyber resilient?
Oh, gosh, have we got about 12 hours? There are so many things. But look, I think first up, please don't get frightened by all the stats, okay? Really, doing something is better than doing nothing because it's just all too hard. It's a bit like, if you're being chased by a crocodile, you don't need to be first, you just don't need to be last. And that's, I think, a really good rule of thumb with this. The usual things, your best line of defense are your people. And by people, I mean staff, but clients as well. Okay. So you need to take them on the journey. And I think it's really important that it's done in increments. So a little bit over a long period is better because it sticks stronger than one big Hail Mary, 2 hours worth of cyber training once a year. Go get them, sunshine. And look, I can guarantee that's a waste of 2 hours. So, just something there. One which is, and look, it's not sexy. It's not like, hunting on the dark web for a Conti affiliate or anything like that. Password hygiene. And you need to keep up with the times, so to speak. So this time last year, I would have been saying 8 complex characters, uppercase, lowercase, this, that, and the other. It's fine. It'll take about, it'll be fine. Now I can breach, not me personally, obviously I would never do that, but the naughty people can breach it in less than 60 minutes. Okay, so it's no longer 8. 12 will get you 3,000 years worth, but I can't promise what will happen next year. And 18, I think it is, will take about 92 billion years. There's a group called Hive, and if you Google Hive and password, They have a great little table. So just keep your eye on that, and, raise that with both your staff and your clients. Just say, oh, have you updated your passwords recently? Did you know that insert social media platform had a breach of passwords? Have you updated it recently? It's really, really important. If it's not in writing, I've got plausible deniability. So if you need policies and procedures, and you need to make sure that everyone follows them. So do you have social media policies, password policies, things of that nature? Patching, patch early, patch often, patch everything. And a great example of that is, if you haven't seen it, there was a breach last year with Kaseya. So just Google that and it will come up. It started out as a ransomware payment, $70 million. Thanks for being here. And that's in US dollars, so real money. They got a discount to 50, so yay them. But the interesting thing is not the fact it was so big, but it was the fact that they knew that there was what they call a vulnerability, so a place that the bad guy can get in July of 2015. The attack did not occur until July 2021. And they were doing what they call a one-to-many approach. So the person that you've outsourced your IT to, your managed service provider, that was their target. They targeted 50 and they got 1,500 businesses. So, you just sort of need to sort of start asking questions about it. Just quickly, because I want Fraser to have a thing in here, website security, really important. Pay for it, don't get the freebie. And device security. Not everyone, but many people pay $1,200 for a phone, and they won't pay $8 a month for security on the phone that has, receiving their two-factor, doing their emails for work and personal. It's a crime.
Yeah, I agree. And there's so many aspects to this. Obviously, to me, it starts with the staff. It starts with this all staff being trained and getting ongoing training, not, like you said, not just doing something up front. Advisors are used to doing CPD, but this is kind of like, you need to have CPD for all of your staff, every single person that can access your database, that can access your CRM, all those sorts of things, anything inside your business. They all need to be locked down. Obviously, things like multi-factor authentication and permissions around which staff can get access to which things, only what they need to have. There's a lot of that sort of stuff, that's sort of what we call basic hygiene. But then when we start getting to the foundations, having that staff training, having, as you mentioned, your patching done and your software and your systems in place to that you're paying for a decent, a really good high level, high quality, as high as you can get, antivirus type software, that you're not just relying on the free version. That would be a bit like me saying, what if I offered you a free income protection policy? Then you could cancel your paid one. You'd go, no way, I'm never going to take that, because I know exactly that's going to be worth nothing. So don't worry about the free stuff. Pay for something decent. I would say the directors of a business, the liability falls on the directors of the business and the owners of the business to take these reasonable steps. ASIC will be looking at, and the other regulators look at, whether reasonable steps have been taken, and the onus falls back on the business owner to make sure that something is being done and those reasonable steps are being taken. Now, with a financial advice business, due to the nature of the data being held, people's bank accounts, their personal information, their medical information on a personal statement, all their super details, there's so many complexities around what a financial advisor holds, that the reasonable steps required by a financial advisor are higher than the reasonable steps required by your local gym or another business down the street that just has your email address and their password on file. And I would say, finally, obviously we spoke about insurance already, but the next thing really is around email and domain. About 93% of incidents start inside an email. Email is not a safe space to send or receive information. In fact, it's not a safe space to even have a domain and email set up unless you put a fence around it. When you purchase a domain name on the internet, yourbusinessname.com or .com.au or .com and .com.au, you're purchasing pieces of real estate on the internet, and you really need to put locks and keys and fences around those pieces of real estate, because people can come onto them and start pretending to be you and committing fraud, and you're pretty much liable for that because it's your piece of real estate on the internet.
Exactly. And if I can just touch on the email security, because that's a huge one. Because of the recent Ukraine invasion, we're finding that there's a malware out there. They have these great names. This one's called Imitet. But essentially what they're doing is they're taking advantage of public sentiment with email campaigns. And they're saying, you know, do you want to sponsor XYZ in this area? You know, click here, go on and go forth. So you just have to be super careful. But the really concerning thing is it's no longer just a click here. By opening the email, if there is a picture in there, the picture can actually have a virus embedded in it. They call it a Trojan horse, and we all know what a Trojan horse is. So just be super careful. And the trick of the trade is, you know, look at where it's being sent from, but just be really, really careful that letters and numbers haven't been switched over. So if you have an I in your letter, in your name, sometimes they put a 1, or if you have an O, sometimes they put a 0, and sometimes they put Cyrillic characters, I'll get that out in a minute, instead of our alphabet. So you just have to be a little bit aware. The days of getting an email like this with typos and bad grammar are pretty much gone and dusted. They actually had Conti had a web advert, both on the surface web, so the one that you and I play in, and the dark web just before Christmas. Now, Conti are one of the largest providers of malware in the world, so they're quite naughty, and they were advertising for native English speakers. So I would suggest they probably found a few, because they pay very well and they have an amazing business system. Like, it is a pure business for them. So just be a little bit aware. Being too paranoid, I don't think is enough.
I just want to build on that comment too around the idea of cyber gangs. And these cyber gangs, you know, they do make a lot of money, and they pay their staff very, very well. Some of them actually, you know, think that they're working for legitimate organizations, but they pay their staff very, very well, and they have very, very high level people that are creating extremely complex malware. Now, originally what they used to do is they used to take that high complex malware and they would attack large businesses and go for large ransoms. But then what they decided to do after a while is go, well, actually, we've got this really sophisticated software. We're going to make this available as a service to local hackers down the road, and they can then use this really complex software and just pay them a percentage. So, the financial advisors don't stand a chance against this sort of software unless they've got some really high security in place.
Yeah. And look, there's nothing worse than getting a call. We got a call last year. It wasn't from a client. I just want to point that out. It was from a prospect who said, oh, have you ever come across this group? And they inserted the name of Conti, which, as I've said it previously, is quite a large, well-known group. And I'm going, yes. They're going, is it bad? I'm going, yes. And that started several months of fun-filled frivolities, which I would wish on no one. So just be super careful.
Right. So last question today. How can we make cybersecurity part of the advice process? Fraser, we'll start with you.
I think there's lots of different little steps in the process, the advice process, where security kicks in, and obviously, you know, sharing of information around secure client portals is essential, rather than information over email, as I've mentioned. A lot of the fact-finding information, it's very easy to set up a simple fact-finding form, but again, you've got to make sure that information is stored in the appropriate Australian servers. Otherwise, you might breach some privacy principles with regard to information being stored overseas. So just be really careful when you're using things like maybe Loom videos or something, because that might not be stored in Australian servers, or if you're using transcription services, then that also might be recording your client's personal, private, confidential information on servers that aren't based in Australia. So from all different aspects throughout the advice process, it's about making sure that, you know, maintaining high levels of security, password protections on important information and documentation. As I mentioned, the client portals, that you need a secure client portal rather than transitioning information through email, or all sorts of things around email and domain security are really important. There's about 12 or 13 different separate keys and pieces that should be involved in an email, which unfortunately slows email down and stops it getting a lot of the time, but it's better to be safe than email should be safe rather than just really easy to send and receive. and just so very much around document sharing, and I think the staff training things are essential too. That the policies and procedures, your staff are treating the confidential information like it's gold.
Absolutely. And just to reiterate on that email security, it pains me when you see clients emailing application forms or whatever it happens to be, and they've saved it in their email. Email is not a library. So if you are saving things in your Hotmail, Gmail, whatever mail, please, I beg of you, don't. And that's something that you can actually say in your client meetings. When you have your review meetings, by the way, this is, how seriously we're taking the protection of your data. One of the things that we always suggest to our clients is do not use email as a library system. So, things of that nature. But I think, and I bow to one of my old bosses here, so Jono, if you're watching, he always said that prior preparation prevents poor performance. Yes, I've missed out one P because I don't want to offend anyone. But essentially, you need to have contingency, continuity, and resumption plans in place. They need to be in writing and they need to be practiced. If you do not practice them, don't bother putting them in writing. Just don't bother doing it. It's just not worth the paper it's written on. And the other thing, which is going to probably sound a little bit weird coming from someone in cyber, make sure you have a hard copy, because if you have it all saved on your system and your system is encrypted, you cannot get to it. And you also need to think in these plans, how am I going to get the message out to my clients, to my staff, when my main system is encrypted and I can't access it? Do I go to a fully encrypted messaging service? Please, not WhatsApp. That is not what I'm suggesting. If you're going down that route, look at Telegram or Signal. But, just sort of have a little bit of a think of that. And if you don't know where to start, because if you've not done it before, it can be a bit scary, go back to your cyber insurance policy and see what they're saying that you must do in the event of a breach. And if you're not sure, ring up the BDM and get them to come out and do what they call a tabletop exercise. I would personally do that anyway and say, come on out, spend an afternoon with us, and we're going to pretend to have a breach. And I want you, BDM, to walk me through the steps that I need to take in order to get this through. And just to reiterate on what Fraser was saying before with the Kaplan, yes, 100% agree with that. The other thing to remember, because advisors now have to adhere to the Tax Practitioners Board requirements as well, just make sure you're across that, because they've been making some changes to the cyber requirements. So just, be a little bit careful there as well.
Yeah, and just on that legislation, ASIC do actually have a very good part of their website where they talk about their principles when involved with cybersecurity and cyber resilience. So check out what they've got on their website. But I would also refer back to the website, the new website that the government has put out called cyber.gov.au, which is a great, probably the first port of call for a lot of the cyber stuff that the government wants small business to put in place.
Yeah. But as I said, doing something rather than doing nothing, I think, is really key.
Was that your final word?
So I could go on for ages, but I will stop in the interest of sanity. So yes.
We'll do it again. So we'll start with you, Fraser. Your final words today.
I think the final word for me is to prioritize it. Make this something that your business, as part of your business as usual, and to make, like I said, find a cyber champion, find somebody in the business that's going to take charge of it. Or if it's not going to be you, then it's got to be somebody in the business, and make sure that this becomes an ongoing policy as a procedure as part of your business as usual.
Karen?
Yeah. Look, cybersecurity doesn't need to be expensive or hard or scary. You just need to take the first step. But sometimes we don't know where to start. And as Fraser quite rightly said, have a look at the government websites. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I put out a Friday file every Friday, funny that, and it just gives handy hints to SMBs on what to do with cybersecurity. It's not a sell. It's just more of an information, because I think it's important that we share information in this environment. Or dive onto our website and have a look at some of the articles that I've written, because I've touched on those topics that we've discussed, be it website security, how to have security in a device business. So if you do get stuck, please reach out. There are no questions that are dumb. I've been working with advisors for over 20 years. You can probably see the grey. We welcome all questions.
Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Ashley. Thanks, Fraser.
We hope that you've enjoyed episode 8 of the AFA Gen X podcast. A huge shout out to Karen and Fraser for their time. Thanks again to the AFA and Advice Intelligence. See you soon.